If you're sitting back there, come on in and find a seat. We have quite a few things happening in our afternoon session. And this session is all about cybersecurity and securing your portfolio. And we're going to look at a few different angles from the building owner standpoint, from an occupant standpoint. There's, I think, a lot of really exciting things happening in cybersecurity as it relates to CRE. It's a time in the industry where we have more technology to address these issues, more people with skill set to address these issues than ever before. And it's frankly a really beautiful thing. It's not this big, scary component of a programming day today like it may have been a long time ago, even, a few years ago, maybe even last year. So I want to talk about just some of the common misconceptions when building owners and occupiers are considering their strategy.
Leave it to Mario to call cybersecurity exciting and not scary.
Fun times.
Fun times. Fun times. Yeah, go talk to my security guys, see how much fun they have sometimes. No, I'll start. So I'm Jessica Rio. I'm the Chief Information Officer with Hines. Hines is a private company based out of Houston, 24 countries, 4 food groups, predominantly office. So I've been with Hines a long time, a CIO, 12 years. So real quick. The cool thing about it is, you brought up a few years ago, one of the things that folks were doing in cyberspace, at least even in my groups or even with my peers, is they were trying to scare people all the time. It's like cyber, scary. And so everybody was going after it from a fear standpoint instead of really just education and awareness and making sure that people knew that this is just the standard operating procedure nowadays, that you just have to think cyber. And the other thing that's interesting is I've been in this industry a long time, and we've been doing security for a long time. Back in the days, we were doing virus protection, we've been doing firewalls, so the basic stuff we've been doing for a lot of years. So it's not new. In IT, it's not new. We've been trying to protect computers since they first came out. I was watching recently a couple movies from the 80s, and they were hacking and they were breaking into computers and stuff. So it's not anything new. It's just now there's a bigger awareness just because of how connected we are. So I think the big difference in my mind is that because we're so connected and because the attacks can come from anywhere, it's something that definitely has raised the awareness. So
my name is Carl May. I'm one of the founders and CEO of Join. Misconceptions about cybersecurity is that when we look back to the 80s, as Jesse mentioned, certainly there were a lot of attacks on computers, but those were typically the way we connected our computers to the outside world was over a very, very different type of, certainly in the 80s, was a different kind of a network than what we have today. Today we have a giant public internet, and the public internet is what the bad people or the bad guys use to attack us. So I think from a misperception, if that really is the right word, is that attacks are constant. So I'm going to provide the counterpoint to no fear. They are constant. We go into the sites that we deploy. We do testing and see all sorts of weird stuff from normally one of 4 well-known countries around the world. The idea really is that you have, what's different is that in today's modern buildings, you have a huge number of devices that are now exposed to that public network. Access control systems, your HVAC systems, the ability to turn an HVAC system on the weekend, for instance, or it might be the cameras that are surveilling us. Those are all items, those are all devices that are now connected to a public network, and it's that public network that provides the access to the hacker or the agent that wants to get access to those devices for typically nefarious means.
And it is interesting because we're in a time of an abundance of technology, so every new technology that is implemented is essentially a new vulnerability in the tech stack of either a physical building, the infrastructure, or the enterprise, the actual company and organization itself. Jesse, can you speak a little bit to how you organize these two and how you would tackle the physical infrastructure security versus like the actual enterprise security, because they're very different?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us growing up, we were protecting our employees, we were protecting our data, and making sure that people didn't get into the banking information, the financial information, our accounting systems. And a lot of IT folks grew up that way, protect the data, protect the data. And unless you're in a real estate or organization or an industry where you have to protect physical assets as well, you didn't think about that as much. And so now that everything's connected, I agree with Carl, everything's connected, we're really having to focus more on the buildings. And so I think, just speaking for Hines and a lot of my peers, there's some on here, I think we're all doing a pretty good job on the enterprise side. So I think we've got tools, we've got a bunch of technologies out there, some new ones have come up. And so I think we're all doing a really good job on protecting the enterprise. People still get through with some phishing emails here and there, but the awareness level has gone up. But the challenge is, because of the rapid rise of the IoT devices and everything being connected, is we're playing catch up. And so we're playing catch up in that space. So you're seeing that also with a bunch of startups trying to tackle that space, because IT folks historically haven't been as involved with the engineers and the operations folks trying to make sure we got the right technology in place. They kind of started off doing it themselves, installing something that's supposed to last 25 years. And so when they designed that piece of equipment 25 years ago, they weren't thinking about the hackers of today. And so we're trying to figure out how to catch up in that space. And so a lot of focus on my team. I've got dedicated people that are focused on just how do we control and work with folks in the building space itself. And so that's the big shift for IT, and a lot of dollars are now being spent on the property side.
And it's not just banking information and employee information anymore. It's also, and we're uniquely poised being here in San Francisco, but it's intellectual property, and it's the secret sauce, right, behind what makes a company tick. So Carl, talk to us a little bit about the tenant expectations and the priorities that they're putting on security.
Well, I mean, certainly, if you look at it, that's actually a good point. I mean, the extension to we're becoming more connected is that the environments to which Jesse referred, that many of us are used to, those of us who are really old, not to suggest that he is, but
experienced
that I am, is that also a lot of those IT resources that we rely on are now migrating to the cloud, whether it's the public cloud or the private cloud. It doesn't really matter, it's one or the other. What happens is that we now have lost a certain degree of control over the intellectual property or the data that we have. That's now moved out of our premise control, right? We can lock it in a closet on a floor like this. Well, if it's sitting at Amazon Web Services, or if it's sitting at a data center here in San Francisco, that's still our data, it's still our proprietary information, but now the way we access it is over some sort of public network. And so I think that what people, when we talked about this as we were setting up the conversation, there's a cybersecurity element, but obviously there's also a data privacy or data protection element as well. Probably as many of you know, you have you get I don't want to make an ad, I hope I don't offend anybody by taking out my little badge here, but you have an HID or a Salto or proxy, or you have some sort of access control device, and associated with that is information about you. It's probably your name, your mobile phone number, your email address. That is all personally identifiable information that now has the potential to be exposed to third parties. So every company is a tech company today. That's one of the things that we say. We all develop, everybody over here is developing some sort of technology. And now we have to be much more vigilant about how we access that intellectual property and who else has access to it, and how do we ensure that we're in control of that. And so those become, for the tenant, for the enterprise, those become the big challenges.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like us when we go into a hotel and we expect wireless, we expect Wi-Fi, we expect certain services, and I think the tenants, same thing. They're expecting to be in our buildings, they're expecting to be in our flexible workplaces, workspaces, however you guys want to define that, but the space. They're expecting to be there, and they're expecting to be secure. Nobody wants to go in there and feel like someone's going to sniff and hack their piece of information. They want to be able to access their email, do their banking, their checking. And so I think the tenants are expecting that a little bit more of landlords. And so now the question is, how do we bring that to our buildings in a cost-effective way? And how do we bring that to some buildings where there's multi-tenants, and some of those tenants are legal firms or financial firms, and they don't want you connecting to their network, so they don't want to ride on your network. So we're having to figure that out. But there is that expectation from those folks that they're coming into a very secure building.
Do you think that a strong cybersecurity strategy speaks to an elevated value of a building or a portfolio, if you will, when they can trust that they're walking in, they don't have to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's to be determined because it's we're a lot more focus is being placed than just starting. But I mean, I don't. I'm trying to remember in the last year or two whether I've answered any due diligence questions where there hasn't been a cybersecurity component from the investor side or some of the bigger tenants where they're asking, what is your cybersecurity program? What is your recovery plan? And so the more they're asking more and more questions around cybersecurity. So whether the value, whether there's a value add, it's to be determined. But whether you actually get the building might matter now because they're asking these questions. They want to know that they're investing in a building or the tenants are moving into a building that is very secure. And so as an IT organization, is Hines positioned in a way to make sure that we're protecting everything around the building, including the tenants. And so, yeah, I mean, there isn't a due diligence questionnaire that I don't answer now that doesn't have a big cyber component.
Interesting. I mean, Carl, we talked a little bit about this in the preparation for this conversation, the value of walking into a space that has an underlying join platform and the trust that somebody instills in that space, therefore. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I appreciate the plug, but let me address one other point that Jesse brought up, which I think is very important, and I'll sort of personalize it for everybody. When you walk into a building, you probably don't think, I can guarantee you're going to think about it differently after I mention it. Every time you walk into a building, you're undoubtedly going to see a camera, right? Well, that camera is probably taking images of you. It's taking a picture of you, or it's taking, even worse, sort of moving footage of you. Have you ever thought about where that goes? Who has access to it? Who has access to your image, which is probably pretty hard to change, although I know some pretty good plastic surgeons out there. The reality is, there are biometric elements. I mean, these are the questions that I ask our landlord when I say, so where on earth does that camera go? And he says, well, I can look at your picture right now. That's not what I care about. Where do you store it? So number one, I think that as to Jesse's point, going into a building, there are so many devices around that track us, that collect information about us, and until you've been hacked, like I've been twice in the last 12 months, once or 18 months because of Equifax, and recently because using, a Starbucks or a hotel Wi-Fi, you really have to get religion about security. So going back to the IT as a service, I think that a lot of us, also as Jesse said, a lot of us take for granted that we go into an environment, we go to the airport lounge at SFO, if you're foolish enough to fly in and out of SFO this month, or you go to, you're at Starbucks or something like that, and you start, you want to get access to, the web, or I hope nobody is doing his or her banking. You are, in many cases, you are exposing a lot of personal data to the outside world, and we've even, part of our story as a company when we work with the likes of Boston Properties and others supporting their workspace as a service or the spec suites or whatever, is their tenants, certainly actually tenants of all sizes, because as I said earlier, all companies are tech companies, they're very, very sensitive when it comes to how can you provide that trust, as Mariel said, how can you provide a trusted digital workplace environment that can ensure that as I'm accessing a development environment somewhere, or I'm transferring files, there isn't an opportunity for that to be redirected, hacked, whatever. And so, we believe that as more and more diverse office offerings, not, we're in an empty shell, as the companies like Hines offer a much wider variety of products, some of those are going to include we'll call the IT package, and that is going to need to take into consideration much more sophisticated customer requirements when it comes to cybersecurity, data privacy, data protection, and so forth.
So this is my last question. I want to know about some of the big wins in cybersecurity. For this industry, I want to leave these guys on a positive note, and I want to hear about what are some of the successes in terms of what we're able to do today with the introduction of new technology. that people should know about.
Have you guys ever seen Heinz on the Wall Street Journal being hacked or showing up that we got breached? No? Okay, good. That's a big win right there. No, I mean, I think the big win is, again, a couple things. One is because it has such a big focus, there are a lot more companies targeting it. So there are a lot more solutions out there that are really good. With the advent of the cloud, now there's crowdsourcing. So there's solutions out there that if you get an attack in Europe, it goes up to the cloud, everybody knows about it, and then all these tools start figuring out if it's hitting other parts of the world and trying to battle it. So even though the hackers have access to all this, the internet, so do the technology providers that are building these solutions. And so I think it's exciting because you can create these great solutions. And we've seen a lot of good ones, and they've made my job easier. People ask me, can you sleep at night? And the answer is yes, because I've got good teams and also have technologies out there, and a lot of them have been involved in the last 2 or 3 years. I think I saw where Cyber Reason is one we've been looking at, and they're one of the unicorns. I mean, how often do you get a cybersecurity firm that becomes a unicorn? I mean, that's pretty crazy. But I think that's one. And I think the second one is because there's such an awareness, I think everybody, especially startups, they're starting to look at it from the day one. I know I used to be a coder back in the day, and I know I never thought about cybersecurity when I was coding. It was one of the last things I looked at, or maybe after testing. Right? Well, now everybody's looking at cybersecurity from day one. The employees are looking at cybersecurity. They're thinking about cybersecurity. So from awareness, that's exciting. So we are able to sleep at night in IT because people are helping us in this battle. It's not just us. And then on the building side, I'll throw out a plug. Montgomery Tech, we use them to do cybersecurity around our buildings. And so having partners out there that are experienced with buildings and systems and cybersecurity just again helps us. So it's an exciting time for us as IT folks, because we do have a lot of friends out there and a lot of solutions.
That's great.
Well, I guess I'd actually say the same thing that Jesse said, which is that I haven't been in the paper, and that's important for me. I don't aspire to be a celebrity. From a win perspective, I think we're in a period where more and more of the CIOs, so Jesse's peers that we work with across the industry, are recognizing that there are in fact threats to as they begin to rely on much more complex systems for their building management, for access control, environmental control, so forth and so on. And I think the big win is that instead of waiting like Target or Equifax or whatever other example might be out there, instead of waiting, and I think it goes also to the very good governance of a lot of these companies, they are getting in front of the problem and addressing the risks of cyber threats in advance so that they don't end up on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Although I think you'd look really good on one of those little sketches they do. I just thought,
I think we're going to close our panel on that positive note. Thank you both for sharing with us, and we'll see you in a little bit.
We're here, so if you have any questions or just come on by. Thank you.